Have you ever noticed how some people can just walk right into a super tense, highly charged room and remain completely unaffected by social pressure, flattery, or guilt trips? I mean, they seem totally bulletproof, right? Well, welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to figure out exactly how they do it. Because being impossible to manipulate isn't about being cold, and it definitely isn't about being cynical. It's actually about understanding the hidden internal mechanisms of the human mind so well that you can spot a trap before it ever snaps shut. Today, we're going to master exactly how to build those defenses.
So, really think about this for a second. Have you ever felt pushed into a decision you didn't quite want to make? Like you were kind of maneuvered into a corner? If you're nodding your head, hey, you are absolutely not alone. This is a totally universal feeling. Psychology tells us that manipulation works by exploiting our natural, deeply wired human needs. We all have this innate desire for safety, a huge craving for validation, and a pull toward immediate rewards. Manipulators, they just recognize these predictable needs and use them as levers. But once you understand this mechanism, you can completely take away their leverage.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start by unpacking the invisible trap, move into how to own your reality, then read the hidden context and break the emotion loop. Finally, we'll cover how to shield your deepest insecurities to ultimately hit our goal, achieving psychological freedom.
All right, step 1, the invisible trap.
Moving right along to step 2, own your reality.
Think of yourself as a student about to embark on a really vital journey of self-mastery. Psychological immunity doesn't just happen by accident, right? To construct the outer walls of your psychological fortress, you have to make a fundamental pivot. You need to go from being a passive observer to an active owner of your reality. And honestly, that means you have to stop practicing responsibility avoidance. This is when you look for literally anyone else to blame whenever things go wrong. We're talking bad luck, a difficult boss, your family, the whole shebang. Psychology actually shows that one of the absolute biggest signs of emotional immaturity is this exact type of blame shifting. So why does this matter for manipulation? Because manipulators absolutely love people who shift blame. They use those excuses to lead you further and further away from the facts. When you avoid responsibility, you're essentially creating uncomfortable truths about yourself that you just don't want to face, and a manipulator will gladly use those hidden truths to control your ego. But the second you own your mistakes, you completely strip them of that ammunition. It's a real game changer.
Another incredibly powerful outer defense is mastering how you communicate. Just consider the difference between talking to fill silence versus actually bringing information in. You know how some people talk simply because they can't handle awkward silences? It's an anxious habit. They just want to fill the dead air. But quiet, observant individuals, they are busy noticing patterns while everyone else is busy speaking. Psychologically speaking, bringing information in rather than giving it out is a massive form of self-protection. Speaking less gives you direct control over what others know about your insecurities. If you become comfortable with pauses, with silence, you drop the pressure to constantly fill the air, and that means you aren't accidentally handing a manipulator the exact information they need to target you.
Which brings us to step 3, read the hidden context. Now that we've fortified our outer behavior, let's move inward a bit to our perceptual defenses. This is all about how an adaptive mind processes situations, rather than just blindly reacting to them. To do that, we're going to practice what we call context building, using 3 really specific steps. Step 1, ask yourself, what is changing in this situation? Step 2, what is connected here that might not be totally obvious right away? And step 3, what could happen next? Instead of just accepting a gesture or a random piece of data at face value, these steps help you build a really comprehensive mental model of human behavior. You aren't just hearing words anymore, you're mapping out intentions. It's literally like a giant puzzle.
So whenever you're presented with new information, maybe a grand gesture or just a sudden weird change in someone's behavior, I really want you to mentally pause. Ask yourself, why does this work? And what are the real motives here? By doing this, you start to see the gap between the actual facts of a situation and the interpretive layer that a manipulator is trying so hard to sell you. You basically stop accepting their version of the story and start seeing the underlying reality for what it is.
Moving on to step 4, break the emotion loop.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that it represents a critical trial in our toolkit. We absolutely have to learn how to disconnect our decisions from temporary, fleeting emotions. This biological trap totally works against us. Manipulators will often shower you with validation or, promise you these instant, perfect new lives just to trigger a dopamine loop in your brain. This early obsession literally tricks your mind into mistaking mere potential for actual reality. You get so hyped up, you feel like you've already succeeded just by talking about it. So how do you defend against this? Well, psychology shows that people who build strong foundations train themselves to tolerate short-term discomfort for long-term gain. By ignoring that sudden spike of emotional excitement and focusing purely on evidence-based growth, you make yourself completely immune to the lure of false promises.
There's another psychological vulnerability we really have to patch up here, and it's called the mere exposure effect. Our brains have this natural, deeply ingrained preference for whatever feels familiar. Why? Because predictability creates a sense of psychological safety. And trust me, manipulators know this. They exploit it by becoming a constant, familiar presence in your life until your mental fortress naturally drops its guard simply because they feel safe.
To counter that, you need to become incredibly comfortable standing out. You literally have to stop fearing being different. In fact, people who grow up feeling different often become the absolute most self-aware and independent thinkers. Follow your own preferences. Stop worrying so much about fitting in. When you start basing your decisions strictly on your own core values, you learn to easily ignore group momentum. You stop making choices just because someone happens to be familiar or, because everyone else is doing it.
Let's move to and see how this builds into step 5. Shield your deepest insecurities.
Okay, we are now entering the deepest psychological core of our defense toolkit. Everyone, literally without exception, has things they hide. We all have deep fears, mistakes we deeply regret, and this underlying need for other people. Manipulators act like radar. They're constantly scanning for these unseen patterns to find a way in. So how do you protect that core? You use metacognition. This is just the fascinating ability to think about your own thinking. By practicing metacognition, you are actively scanning your own unseen patterns and vulnerabilities before a manipulator ever gets the chance to exploit them. You just need to clearly understand what it is you are protecting the most, because when you know your own gaps, you can guard them effectively.
Finally, step 6. Achieving psychological freedom.
This is the ultimate goal of the whole shebang today. It's the beautiful shift from a state of constant vulnerability to absolute self-mastery. Becoming impossible to manipulate means you are no longer operating in an exhausted survival mode, where you're just constantly reacting to the world and the people around you. Instead, you transition into making deliberate choices. You're actually building a future based on strong, intentional patterns, rather than just constantly dodging the agendas of others.
And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate philosophy of our explainer today. When you are no longer afraid of your own vulnerability, it can no longer be used as a weapon against you. Taking full ownership of who you are, flaws and all, is the ultimate shield. I mean, if you aren't running from your mistakes or hiding from your fears, there's simply zero leverage left for a manipulator to pull. Embracing your true self, that's what actually sets you free.
So I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought. What unseen patterns are guiding your choices today? Take a little time to really reflect on that. Look closely at your decisions and ask yourself who is actually making them. If you enjoyed learning the hidden psychology behind human behavior and how to use it to protect your own mind, please subscribe. Because once you start understanding these small things, you begin noticing the fascinating patterns that most people completely overlook. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.